parlay.
Right.
We should have worn the same top.
These guys are, it could be like a Diane Arbus thing.
I know.
These guys are 60s in their 60s, but they still like to dress a lot.
That looks weird when you see it, Denise. It really looks very weird.
Oh, it does.
When you see identical twins that dress the same in their 60s.
You see that?
I saw it once. The two older women, they had white gloves. This was about 25 years ago. And they looked almost like...
Never.
They looked like freaks. I mean, it's just, they should have been in the zoo or something.
Do you call each other up in the morning? Are you not wearing this? This is what I'll wear.
Helen okay? Is Helen okay?
She's not having
Okay.
her eyes are put in her eyes. It's earlier.
So the first question is, what stories have you heard about? Have you heard any stories about the great-grandfather of Kiki and Yaya Hari? Albert Michalopoulos, right?
Correct.
That's
Is that
correct.
his name? We're interested to know, where did he live? Anything you've heard, and you can talk together. I mean, you can
Okay.
kind of collaborate on your answers.
It was in Smyrna, I thought, that he lived. He was, and he was a well-educated diplomat.
And they had several physicians in the family.
Right.
And then he was the Greek consul to Malta, we were told. During the time, he was named after his father, by his father, because his father was the Greek consul at Malta during the time of Victoria and Albert. And he got the name Albert, even though it wasn't a Greek name, because his father liked the name during his time as the ambassador to Malta. And
Council to Malta.
Council. And the tradition in the Greek family is that the son is named after the grandfather, and his middle name becomes his father's first name. So that's the way the tradition built up. And Michael is named after our paternal grandfather. So it kept the tradition, and we both have the same middle name, Constantine.
Which was your father's name.
That's right.
That's correct.
So, okay, this idea that he was, or the story that he was in the Foreign Service, he was a representative from Turkey to Malta. One of the things that Spiro...
Well, I'm not sure it was Turkey, Denise. I thought he was the Greek consul, because that whole area was really part of Greece at the time. Okay. And then in the 20s, the Turkish government, kicked them all out.
Well, I thought he went... Okay, this is what Spiro says, that his notes say that he was born in Malta and his family was originally from Cephalonia.
Yeah, that's right. That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and he went, and then Malta itself changed during his lifetime from being an English protectorate, or what was it, an independent?
No, I think it was an English protectorate.
Okay. So there was some, I know in the family there had been this idea that there was English citizenship, dual citizenship or something like that. Had you ever heard anything like that?
I've heard that, but it must have been because Albert, the grandfather, was born in Malta. But I don't know that for sure, Denise.
So if he was born...
If he was born there,
he probably had dual citizenship.
Greek and British.
Okay. But had you ever heard anything more about that there was that he had lived in England, or there was any?
I have not.
I have, nor have I.
I never heard anything about that. Okay, because I had heard stuff like that. So he and Spiro has determined that he lived between 1835 and 1923. Does that sound?
That's about right, because that's the time of the Victorian Albert.
And so he must have died soon after they moved to Piraeus. He must have.
Yes, yeah. Piraeus was 22, or they must have been somewhere around the 20s.
Okay. Now, anything else that you can remember about him? Any other stories or any?
Not. I don't. Do you?
No,
I can't think of.
Okay. Did your mom? Your mom never really talked about him.
She did a little bit, but not very often.
Not very often, and it went to the status of the family. Like your grandmother, was a very well-educated young woman, and had spoke several languages, and because of the Turkish situation where they were forced out, essentially had to go to Athens and Piraeus, and then came to the States as a I believe was it a governess?
It worked for her family as teaching languages.
Right.
And your mother would know more about that, but
So your mom didn't really talk too much about all that?
Not really. The only other thing that I can recall is that dowries were very important, and in order for the middle sister to get married, they had to make a decision of forfeiting all the available assets they had to give enough of a dowry for Abdoxia to get married, and that left our mother without any real opportunity to marry, quote, quote, at that time in Greece. So one of the reasons she came to the States with your mother was to essentially start over, which she regretted. I mean, she always felt that she always remembered the good times in Athens and the lifestyle and the casual lightness of the air, and always would talk about how it was wonderful to have the family and she called it yelio, the laughter that was always
That's
there.
Right. And she was 17 years younger than Thea Abdoxia, and even younger than Thea Hadi.
Oh, 17 years younger than Hadi, and about 13 years younger.
So
14.
she was almost raised by your grandmother, was almost along with your mother and everyone else, Thalia and Helen. So it was kind of like a little odd situation.
But she had a longing for Greece.
Yes, she
the
did.
life that she left behind.
Yeah, she did. She
Absolutely.
always romanticized it.
Yeah, absolutely.
To some extent.
Well, she made a big self-sacrifice.
Mhm.
And I remember second to the last time I was with your mother was at your house.
Mm-hmm.
And her that was the first time I ever heard her tell me how she felt sorry for my grandmother, and that's why one of the reasons she came.
That's
she
right.
realized the isolation,
Mhm.
which has something to do with why our two families were very.
I think that's right.
Yeah. She always used to describe it as the water is crystal clear. You could drop a pin and watch it go to the bottom. As my brother said, the joy, the fun they had. She always, as I said, romanticized it, but it was, and she, I think, longed to visit it at points.
Yeah, and but she didn't talk that much about her dad.
No.
No, very little.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of it was that they probably had a very good life before they were forced out of Turkey, and it was probably a very cultured, very good life for a young child, and she was a very young child, so probably her memories went back to being 4 and 5. She was born in 15, so they were forced out when she was 7.
Yeah.
So that or thereabouts that age, and so you can remember some of those things, and it's a very romanticized period.
Did you ever hear the story about the grandmother, your grandmother, and how there was supposedly, this was always, we never quite could get a grip on this story because it was so bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to move this light up a little closer. You know the story I'm talking about how your grandfather met her. She was the child of somebody he had a crush on.
Yes,
That's right.
Did you hear that?
Yes. Yes. I forget exactly how it goes, but she was, again, very young. She was
Well, what happened, the way I recall it, and this could
Could
be,
you just tell us who we're talking about here. This is
we're
your
talking about our grandmother, your great-grandmother,
Yeah.
our grandmother, who married our grandfather, your great-grandfather, who was some 20-some years older than she was. And the age difference was enormous, because when our mother was born, he was in his 70s, and our grandmother was 52 years old. And so there was at least a 20-year difference between them. And it was a reflection of the fact that he had fallen in love with our grandmother's mother, wasn't able to marry her, as the story goes, and then married the daughter.
Basically, that's exactly,
That's what you
something
think that's
something to
true?
that. I
Don't know if it's that's
true.
what we've been kind of led to
Whether
believe.
it's been enhanced or not, but that's some story to that effect, Denise.
Well, so did you remember hearing why he wasn't allowed to marry the mother of the woman he eventually married? Do you remember that?
I don't know the reason,
I
no.
don't either.
Because I heard it was a class thing.
It,
That her family felt that he was too good for her, and that it wouldn't.
He was too good.
Yeah, that's a switch. Huh?
Yeah.
That he was the wrong class. He was too upper class, and that wouldn't be good. But that's all. Did you ever meet any of the other siblings in that family? I have a picture of them. They all look so sad. I call them the dispossessed.
Yeah.
the only one was Evdokia, which was the middle sister.
Yeah,
between
and
your grandmother and my mother.
Yeah, and I remember once in the 60s, it was 1964, when Albert and I went there after college, Theodoxia did show us where our grandmother lived. Remember, she pointed it out at the top of the hill, but we never did know her as when she was alive.
What did that place look like? It was in Pirias?
I just don't remember right now where it was, but you pointed it out. It was in Piria. It probably was.
It was
but,
where they came once they
but
were
it was
there.
high up.
It was high up on the hill.
Yeah, on the
Because
hill.
they had pretty compromised circumstances when they came.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so just that history a little bit, the diaspora. Did you ever hear any stories about the actual flight and what happened to them personally?
I think the only thing we heard was that they lost everything, their home, their possessions. They were just basically left with the bags they took with them, and they may have taken some jewelry, but pretty much lost everything. Went to the Piras, and then I don't know exactly how this transpired, but they did get some money from the International Red Cross.
I'm not.
Something I heard something to that, some reparations, but I'm not sure if that's true. And but that was so they arrived pretty much with just what they brought with them to the Piras.
But she never talked about it. I don't ever remember having a conversation with her about it.
That's right.
And I heard most of this from Thalia and your mother.
So your
And Helen.
mother did not talk about that.
I never heard her talk about
very
it.
little, if ever.
Never.
Wow. Now your father, just aside and for my own information, he didn't go through that.
He was brought here when he was 10 years old by my grandfather.
So this was before 22?
So this is 1920.
Wow, so they knew.
And he had a cousin that, of all places, lived in Yorkville, Ohio. Kondoyani was his name. And he brought him there as a 10-year-old youngster and then went back. Absolutely. Spent about a month. My grandfather spent about a month or two with him and then went back to Greece. My father always felt somewhat abandoned because of that, and he was brought up by this family, the Kondoyani family, went to grade school, high school there. And so he started out without any family other than these good friends of my grandfather's.
So he was a little bit of almost like an orphan.
Very-
What happened with his mom?
She stayed in Greece, and he had sisters. He had two sisters, I believe.
That's right.
Stayed in Greece.
They stayed in Greece, yes.
And the purpose of my grandfather going back and leaving him here was only a temporary, trip where he was going to bring his wife and his two daughters over. And they changed the immigration statutes, and he could never get back into the country.
Your grandfather?
Yeah, he could never come back.
But eventually he did come back.
In the late 50s,
He
early
was an old
50s.
man. Oh, so your father really...
That's right.
that wasn't
So
the
there was
plan,
about a
really.
30-year hiatus between his first trip and this when he returned.
And he continually sent monies to Greece to support them.
Your father did.
Yeah.
And the same with our mother. I mean, I can remember packing up all of our clothes every
time.
3 months and sending them to Greece. This was, right after the war, between 46 and probably 56, a 10-year period. She was constantly sending packages there.
They were in dire straits at that time. Have you ever heard the story of the Iliadis family? They were in-laws. Iliadis were in-laws who married the aunt who went to get her jewelry but was never heard from again. Did you ever hear that story?
I have not.
I have not either.
Okay.
No.
Do you know the maternal, your grandmother's name, your mom's mother's maiden name?
Michalopoulos?
She was no.
Michalopoulos.
No, her maiden name.
Our grandmother's maiden name.
Mm-hmm.
No.
No. My mother's maiden name was Michalopoulos, but I don't know our grandmother's name. I'm not familiar
You
with.
don't know that. Okay. Did you ever? You had no. You never saw her.
No, we saw pictures of her
Yeah.
because our mother went back to visit her about 48 or 49. And she died, I believe, our grandmother was 93, your great-grandmother was 93 or something like that,
Yes.
92, 93.
She was quite old, but you never knew her.
No.
Okay, Spiro said, Spiro's interviewed a lot of people. I have two stories of how the family was evacuated from Bandirma. Either they left on a ship owned by the Iliadis family, which you never heard of, or the American Navy rescued them. Have you ever heard these stories?
The only thing I've heard is that from your aunts, and that was that they were on a ship and they were still being pursued, and there was a lot of shootings and lots of knifings and things, and they somehow were able to get away. Then what I subsequently have read is that the British were supposed to assist them and just stayed off the coast and did absolutely nothing to protect them. So the fact that they could get onto a ship and get away was a miracle.
You know, it brings me to a question that's not on my list, but because your mom and your father really had quite a different set of circumstances that they experienced, did you ever sense, did she have more anxiety? Did she seem less secure than him? Of course, he had this other thing where his father left him.
Yeah.
And she saw all that, the fleeing and all of that. I mean, did they seem equally, how did they secure themselves in after such traumas?
I think my father embraced this country. I mean, I remember when, as he got older, he got very emotional about the opportunity he found here and was very comfortable here. I think my mother never quite was as much. She always kind of longed to go back, and so it was they just were a little different places as they got older with regard to what Greece meant. I think he as Albert I think said earlier, he rarely talked about it or even rarely went back.
And then I think because of the financial crisis they went through when they were evicted from Turkey, our mother probably felt more financial insecurity. She never wanted to, she was always worried about being poor again and losing everything.
Yeah.
Whereas my father never, I don't think really, that wasn't his issue.
She would always make economias,
right.
Always saving money here, saving money there, and then spending it on little things that she wanted. But she would always was much more into the economic part of her own security.
There's a basic insecurity there. Okay, that's kind of the question I just had here. Do you ever hear, my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Did you ever hear him talk about his immigration experience, his life in Turkey, anything? Or was he more like your dad, just sort of don't look back?
I don't remember. I don't know if you. When we knew him as young children, and I don't remember too much other than he came from Turkey.
He was always very nicely dressed.
Very nicely dressed.
He always wore bow ties and tuxedo.
Loves figs, his fig trees.
He was a great backgammon player, taught us backgammon.
Yeah, wonderful backgammon. We had wonderful summers with him.
And it was always, going with him to the movie theaters.
Mm-hmm. And I remember once he took us to New York to the Radio City Music Hall. Yes.
So he had a penchant for entertainment.
Yes.
He seemed to be, we always joke about how many of the grandchildren kind of went into something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Leanna's photography studio, and we think maybe that came.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that came.
Well, in that era, the movie theaters were owned by Spiro Skouros. One of some of the great and the big theater chains across the country. So he had a number of theaters in the Washington. I believe your mother would know more in the Washington, Pennsylvania area.
Yeah. So he must have been sort of a little bit like a grandfather figure to you. Both of
Oh,
my
he was
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
wonderful, yeah.
They were more than aunts and uncles.
Yeah.
They were both aunts and uncles and grandparents to us.
Yeah. Well, they were so supportive, Denise. I just can't tell you.
And your mother or Thalia will tell you that they always felt that they were very understanding of us and probably less understanding of their own kids, which
Yeah.
is usually the case.
And vice versa, perhaps,
Yeah.
with your mother. Of course, my mother and my aunt adored your mother.
She was like, if you listen to what, she was like the older sister that wasn't that much older, that really came and just flaunted over them, just loved them all.
Yeah, I think that in that.
Well, we felt the same thing, I think, from Theo Spino and Theo Huddy. I mean, we felt, total support from them. I mean, they were like good counselors. They would help us out sometimes with our own relationships with our parents. They were just very, very supportive and loving.
Yeah.
They really provided that, what an extended family.
That's right.
And Denise, we used to go every summer, and we would spend a month or two there in the summer in Little Washington. It was
Long weeks, weekends.
Long weekends. And we used to hear the trolley train coming by. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like the trip was made back and forth quite a bit.
Almost every Sunday.
I'm going to stop for a second because I want to make an adjustment here.
I looked up to her from the perspective that she was like the ultimate diplomat and the matriarch
That's
that had great judgment
So she seemed very...
and could handle people. I could remember her on the phone talking to people, and just in the manner she was talking, she would essentially, control the conversation and put the person in their proper place, if you will.
Well, maybe that's where my mother got it from, because she's...
Yeah.
When I hear my mother wielding her political...
Yeah.
Exactly.
She was the force. I mean, even though my mother was kind of like the glue, but she was the force. I always thought of her as being the one that was the backbone to some extent of the family.
So these people we've just been talking about, these four people who shaped your lives, and the progeny, were immigrants. Two of them came right out of a diaspora.
Mm-hmm.
The men had come preceded that. How identified with being Greek and coming from a Greek family were you growing up? And just give us the time frame that you grew up in, if you don't mind revealing.
Yeah, from the 40s. Those years were from the 40s to the 50s, was probably the time we spent with them most. Being Greek was very important. You went to the Greek church, you learned Greek, you took Greek reading lessons, but it was also very important to be part of the community, to be educated, to be, I think, American. I can't think of a better term than that, but basically, being Greek, you were always proud of it, and you knew the Greek history. You read the Iliad and the Odyssey and all those in Greek, and we went to Greek school, but it was really much more that you were to educate yourself, you were to be part of the community, and you were supposed to, as much as possible, strive to succeed in life. I
think that's accurate. I think the other aspect to that is that our mother was more into the church than our father, although he was the founder of the church, and he also had great frustrations with it. He would be called upon to do things and be frustrated by the manner in which they managed themselves. They didn't manage themselves very professionally, and he was very, upset about it, but couldn't walk away, but kept it at a distance. And keeping it at a distance was something that kind of came down to us. That we were altar boys, we were in the church, but we also felt that we could be open to other things, and that we could be able to transcend and do what we wanted to do.
We were. It's what our friends. A good example is our childhood friends. We had two sets of friends. We had friends from both the Greek community and friends outside the Greek community. And that was relatively rare. I remember for most of the friends, or from our Greek friends, we're always 100% with our Greek friends. So that gave us a kind of like a broader exposure. And we were never told not to integrate on anything to that effect.
And the other half to that was that they valued education. And it was primarily because neither one of them had been given a chance to go to school. Our aunt, your mother, grandmother, was so well educated, and they wanted to have that. And so we knew that education was important. And as long as we were able to do well in school, that was going to be a continuing activity. And once you get exposed to that, my father would be talking about he used the term, hypocritical in the Greek sense, horiatiko, which meant that, these people have never really
left the
islands. They're still immigrants, and he wanted to be an American. And, you have to, make the effort to do something with yourself. And, being, unable to get away from a smothering heritage where you left because of the issues there was not exactly what you'd come to the States for.
He was fiercely proud, though. He was also Greek. Yeah. We would be at meetings, and sometimes at the banquets or dinners afterward, they would have people play music, and they would ask him to play different songs. People would play some Irish songs. When it came to my dad, he would always play "Never on Sunday" or something like that. But he was very proud. Everyone knew he was Greek, and so it wasn't that he didn't want to be Greek. I think he just, he wanted to do it in his own way.
He didn't want to be confined by it. I think you used a good phrase, Albert, the smothering heritage.
Yeah.
Versus the sort of the proud and expansive
heritage.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right.
That's very good.
And the emphasis on education, which of course is not atypical of Greeks. Greeks have been very successful.
That's right.
In this country and have embraced education, but there's something about our family that really sort of, you're really first generation, right?
Right.
Denise, there's a wonderful picture when we were at Diana's wedding in San Francisco, in which I think you're in it. Your mother, my mother, Helen, Thalia, you, I, my dad, Stelio. If you look at the education that went through that group, it was rather staggering. From all of them, they were just very highly educated. And I think that shows the importance of education, and I think that is, to some extent, a leveler in being able to take advantage of the opportunities that you have in this country.
I think it's interesting that the story of how you guys ended up getting out of Big Red and going to Mercersburg and then to Yale. And just a little comment about, or some comments about, you not only went to law school, but then you went to business school, and do you think that was a little informed by the fact that you came from a heritage where people had not gone to college, and you think it was sort of like a let's make sure we nail this kind of thing? Or
I think we wanted, I think somewhere it had been ingrained in us. Your grandmother helped as well. I remember she'd say something, go for the kala, but I always felt...
What did she say?
Go for the kala was the
good.
The good.
Pandute piasieto kala. Always go for the good parts.
Or the best or something. Best. And I think in those years we realized that a combined business legal education was probably the creme de la creme for business. It gave you you could enter any part of business, whether it was from investment banking or consulting, because you had the legal training and the business background, and that was considered at those years that probably the best background to get into, and so we got it. We just went, and my dad fortunately, and he spent a fortune on us on education. I mean, he never complained once. I don't ever remember him ever saying anything. And he, you know, those were his expensive educations. I remember at his funeral, I said, you know, we cost him dearly to educate us. That he never once ever said anything about the cost of this.
And
So we were
our mother was the same way.
Same way. They never. They just said, do it.
And it was great because you knew that they wanted it, and you could essentially look. So when we graduated, we were both in New York, and all the diplomas we left in Ohio.
Yeah, we did.
And we left them in our old room on the wall. So we thought that it was half theirs as opposed to being all ours.
Yeah, they're still there. They were still. Yeah.
What were these degrees that you got?
No, just the law degrees, the Juris Doctorate, the MBAs, the bar associations, the undergraduate degrees, and the Mercersburg. We're all on the wall, right on the wall there, and we wanted them to enjoy them as much as because they paid for them and they wanted it as much as we did.
So you go in, you finish this extensive and expensive education, and then you're young men in New York. And what part of you did you leave behind? Did you take with you as far as that Greek identity, and how did it work for you as you went into the career world?
I think being Greek, you have to remember the time context. This was 1968. Wall Street and the consulting business were essentially WASP organizations. And Albert and I had all the credentials, so essentially we integrated them in those days for being non-WASP, background. Being Greek was really something that was unusual then, different. It probably was helpful to some extent, but it wasn't anything negative, Denise. It was I think just an unusual situation. I was one of the first. Albert was the first, I think, non-WASP, but Dylan Reed. And so there weren't many other minorities, I'll put it that way, in these organizations, and we felt quite comfortable. I mean, it was never being Greek was never a negative.
Yeah.
It was,
and what happened is that you were had a unique background, and secondly, you had the education, so that you didn't. I never thought about anybody being better. I knew I could. I could compete and be as good as anybody out there, and it was So you never felt that you. In fact, in some instances, I would look around at some of the people and say, "Well, I wonder how they got here." But so you knew you could. You always knew you could. You could do your. You were there. You were competent, and that came from both your parents telling you can do anything you want to do, and then compounding that with the education. And it's kind of hard if they tell you that you have to have an Ivy League background, and you've got 2 Ivy League degrees. So it's they're not going to push that as an issue to distinguish or discriminate. And discrimination was pretty broad there. And that's one of the things that I think our father really taught us, was that everybody is discriminated against, and you can either accept it and try and give up, or you can say, I can beat this, and I can do this, I can be able to succeed. And that's what he did. I mean, he beat all. If anybody transitioned, it was our father, because he came here as an immigrant at 10 years old, impoverished, and he succeeded in the American dream. I mean, he ended up being a very competent, very successful person. Wasn't a mogul, but what he built was incredible. And that transition was probably 2 or 3 times greater than anything we could accomplish, because he laid it all out for us to, he said, if you can do this, it's there for you to pursue
He really did the hard part.
He did the heavy lifting.
He did the heavy lifting. He got it off the ground. I don't know how else to say that. And he ended up on, a number of boards.
In the same way with your aunts and your mother. They were all well educated, and they all, they were given support so that they had the platform to do it. And there's 2 things you see about New York, and that is the really successful people who come with foreign backgrounds come here after they've been educated. They've come here with the skill sets and with credentials. And it's the ones that come here before that takes place and don't get the credentials somehow to be able to be effective and that's not always the case. You always hear about the very successful, immigrant that bootstrapped his way up through, and that's the other half. We were given the first side of that.
And the other thing, to the credit of both the consulting and investment banking are very, very competitive professions. And the bottom line, no matter what you do, the bottom line is results, producing reports, producing underwritings. And if you can't do that, and we never felt, I think Albert in his area, I never felt that we couldn't produce what they wanted in quality form and do it over and over again. And that was the bottom line. You did that, and you had the other credentials, and it was just, you could work your way up those organizations.
I have a question. You mentioned when you were kids not integrating yourself into the dominant culture. Did that play any role in your success when you come to New York? Did you feel more at ease, do you think?
Oh, what happened, just to give you, we were very much into sports, as Denise knows, and most of the team, and I don't remember a lot of the Greeks playing the sports. We played all sports, baseball, football, wrestling. I mean, we were actively involved. Most of our friends, our really good friends, were not Greek. We had a number of Greek friends that we had, but most of the ones, because when you're a male and you're competing in sports, those become your real friends. So we had an entire group that was completely American on that, and I never felt that I wasn't a part of that group, because and maybe it was an advantage from a small town because you could compete with them. Also, the other thing that really helped quite a bit was going to Mercersburg. Mercersburg kind of took the Midwest, took the Steubenville out of us to some extent. I'll have to say that it really did. I had this one professor that would just English, but he would just follow me around, and he would just correct my grammar or correct my English and writing. And he just said, you have the math skills or science skills. He said, we're going to fix this. And we both were very much behind on English, and I think part of that is learning two languages at the same time. But the math, the science, that was not an issue. And we did really well in those. But once we got the English part of it down, still we have a little trouble with it. Yeah.
And the other thing that Mercersburg did, once you got to college, you realized what a privileged background going to boarding school is all about. Because Yale had was much more open in a cross section of social status. And all of a sudden you realized that you were in the upper half as opposed to the lower half, because of your background and your education. I never thought we were wealthy. I knew we were living well, but in the scheme of things, we were upper middle class, not lower middle class. And what Mercersburg did was to let you know that you could be socially, you were more socially better off than what you thought you were in the past.
Yeah, the remarkable thing was sending us to boarding school. It was unheard of. We were in high school, we were in freshman year, and
we were class officers.
Class officers. We were on the football team, the baseball team, the wrestling team, and for my dad to pull us out of there, I remember the school board went and talked to him. Why are you sending your sons away? He said, I'll do what I want with my sons. and I think my sister played an important role in that. She had been in a bar, and she said, Michael and Albert, don't bring a book home. They're not going to learn anything. They need to get away, and so. That was a pivotal moment in our lives. And one of the best moments I had was calling my dad up after he took a lot of criticism for 3 years. I said, are you sitting down? I remember this conversation. I said, well, we just got in early admissions into Yale, so you tell your friends, you did the right thing. And I don't think he ever regretted it. But so that was a really good phone call.
That was one time when being Greek really helped you.
It really did.
Did it tell me about that?
You're absolutely right, Albert.
What
Absolutely.
happened, if you think about this, if you're sitting at a college and you're looking for diversity, we were first generation.
Immigrants.
Midwest, had good grades, good board scores, and we had a father who could pay for it.
Yeah.
So they got the whole shebang for nothing.
Diversity, ethnicity,
and it was a layup from that perspective.
Yeah.
So
it was much easier for us.
And we actually got in the end of our junior year. So we had the whole senior year. The only thing we had to do is keep our grades up. And so we were sitting there with no anxiety about college.
That's amazing.
And we wanted to go to Yale because of being in New Haven.
We wanted to
Being
be
in Connecticut. We wanted to get close to Niantic.
You just wanted to go to Haswigati
That's
and
correct.
drink beer with your friends. That was fun. I enjoyed that. It's I'm trying to make sure I'm hitting everything here. If I don't, my brother will get mad.
There's a siren coming.
Yeah. Okay. I think they went in as soon as the siren goes away.
The other thing I just want to maybe add that I think has been always drilled in us is family. Family comes first. Your children, your cousins. I think that was instilled in us because of the very nature of your mother, Thalia, and all of them coming here and needing to be a group, needing to have someone they could confide in.
And protection.
And protection. So that was, I mean, that family part is very important, I think, to both Albert and I. And it's something that that was the other piece of this whole background we had. Your family, you support them. We're in a foreign country, wherever it may have been, but it's essentially a very, very. It's important to take care of your family.
So oh, go ahead.
The only other thing I remember is that on both sides of the family, my father and my mother, they cared about little people.
Oh yeah.
It was like my mother kept on saying, everybody has a soul. You treat people, with respect. And in order to do anything, everybody has a function, and no function's more important. Because if the person on the assembly line doesn't do his job well, then the person that's at the top fails too. So, everybody is a human being, and they must have said that to us.
Yeah.
I remember my father had his first heart attack.
48.
No, it was the second one when we were at college.
63.
So I was sitting in his office, and there was a man that was the janitor who would always clean up afterwards and polish things. And he was black, and he came up to me and he said, "I hope your father makes it." And I said, "Thank you very much." And he said, "He's always been good to me, and he's always treated me fairly, and I really want him to make it." And that was what they were all about. They had no prejudice about people, and that was the other thing. And I see it in your mother, and I see it in others. There was no prejudice in them in any sense. It was people, and that's probably the most humane thing you can do in life.
Yeah, my dad once, I was in the office, and one of his older friends came in who had hit some very hard times, and he said to me, "This is a very good man. He's coming in to see me. I've known him as an old friend," and he came to ask for money, asked for a loan. He took the checkbook out, I remember, and gave him a loan without even questioning. Just gave it to him, and I said, that was really quick, And he said, do you know what it took? I remember what he said to me. Do you know what it took for him to come in and ask me for a loan? What it meant to his pride, to his just his whole being. I'm able to help him, and I seriously didn't want to put him on a spot or anything like that. So that was, you helped your contemporaries, your Greeks.
He also said something else. I remember it was almost a similar situation. Somebody asked to come in, and he needed some money, and my father gave it to him. And I asked him, I said, don't you feel you were taken advantage of? And he said, no. He said, in life, he said, you have to realize what is the environment. And he said, if you have to pick, would you rather be the person asking for the money, or would you rather be the person giving the money? And he said, I'd rather be able to help and give the money, because it's so much harder to ask.
Well, it's as though he knew from his own experience, and I wonder, do you know anything about how he was able to get to the point of starting his own business and being successful?
Yes, he had a cousin, Alex Bellas, Theo Aleko, as we called him, and they were first cousins, and
Distant first cousin.
distance first cousins, as his mother would say. And he married Thea Calliope, and Thea Calliope's father her maiden name was Rangos, and they had for whatever the reasons, they had a wholesale candy and tobacco business, John Rangos and Sons. So Theo Alecco worked there and eventually took it over. And my father worked, he started out with a lot of small jobs beforehand, shoe shine, dry cleaning. But anyway, this was the first real business endeavor. And then they spun it off and started a company called the, I think, Industrial Tobacco and Candy Company, in which my dad ran in Steubenville, Ohio. And then in 1937, he got the first beer franchise from the Iron City Brewery out of Pittsburgh, and that started him. That became really his life. But he learned the wholesaling business. He learned about distribution from the John Rangos and Sons and the Industrial Tobacco and Candy Company. So he had the credentials when he applied for the franchise to say that he had the background.
Wow. He must have had some capital by then.
Yeah, by then, just enough. I don't know if you needed a lot in those years, but...
Yeah. So these family values that you talk about, and as you've gone into having a life that's very, it's almost a stereotype kind of a life. You live on Park Avenue, you both have successful business careers, your children went to the best school, all of that stuff, and you actually have summer homes in East Hampton. That's a cliche almost.
That's true.
If you'll forgive my saying. Why? I'm curious about choosing that, and I'm also curious about if the values that you bring with you, if you ever felt like sort of different on that level. WASPs are kind of known for their not being very family oriented, and is there ever any little cultural?
Well, I think for me, Albert may have had a different experience, was marrying Helen. Helen's family goes back, I don't know, to Mayflower or something.
Could you tell us who Helen is?
Helen's my wife, Helen Eggleston, Ashurst Eggleston, and she grew up in New York City. I could never get her to leave. I could try to get her to go to Ohio, and she went for one weekend and said, "You can live here, I'm not moving." And I totally understand. But basically, Helen, even though she was from a WASP background, didn't act like a WASP. I don't know how else to say that. She believed strong. She had a very tough family life, but she still wanted to have a family. I wanted to have a very much similar family, and she was an original thinker, a total original thinker, and she also knew New York. She knew New York in a sense of the good schools, the good locations, the fun things to do, and so it opened up a whole world to me that didn't exist. I could do the business part, and she had a wonderful, wonderful ability of sending Belinda to, and Katie both went to, one of the better, finest, boarding schools, Chapin and that in New York. But she knew that whole intricacy. So she had her friends there. So I just kind of entered her world a little bit, and she opened it up to me, and we had just a wonderful time in New York. And New York can be exciting. It was a wonderful place to be, and gradually she had her aunt out here. Her aunt came out here, and Albert had his the first wife. The Breeds were out here as well, so we gradually moved out here. I was terrified of this place. There were all these very fancy people out here, and it didn't. So it just kind of gradually over a period of time that this kind of just evolved into this. It wasn't anything that I don't think I really planned. It just worked out this way. I don't know what.
A little different. I couldn't do what I did as a career anywhere else but Wall Street.
Can you say that to start that again?
I couldn't do as a profession anything that I wanted to do other than being in New York, because if you wanted to be in investment banking and you wanted to be able to be in the upper end of investment banking, you had to be in New York, and I loved it. It was you had a great a profession that was interesting, challenging, and very fulfilling. And I liked New York. I always liked New York. There was so much to do, and I liked the arts. I don't know why. I liked sports and I liked the arts. And once you got involved, it became something that I really could identify with. And it gave me more than just working, because you can work, but you don't want on your tombstone you're a great worker. You want to be able to have some other aspect to your life. And I liked what New York offered. And when you look around at other places, they all have their unique benefits, but this was a nice combination of living in the city because of what your profession was, but then figuring out what were the aspects of it that could make life really enjoyable. And then meeting Kay, and it was very nice to have somebody that felt the same way. And it was a very fortunate thing to have happen. And she loves New York. In fact, she loves it more than I do. I mean, I couldn't get her out of New York if I ever wanted to. So that was the reason.
Also, she opened up some doors to world.
Yeah, also having gone to Yale and Columbia and all that, we had a lot of friends. I mean, it was just, you would just have lunch with them all the time and argue and debate and have some fun. So you had a lot of, it wasn't like you had no real group that you could have fun with.
So it came to feel very
much
familiar and at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did want to just touch a little bit on the sort of that amazing thing of Belinda marrying someone who's half Greek and having that wedding last year in the cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
You guys both got married. You got married in the Greek church. Did you get married both times in the Greek church?
You did.
No, Albert. I think not. You didn't.
I've never gotten married.
Albert has not. No.
The second marriage with the Greek church in
Chicago.
Chicago.
You got married in the Greek church. You both got married.
Well, Albert's first one was
on Madison. It was on Park at the Methodist Church.
Right. But when you married Kay, you got married in the
Greek church. And that was only because the Catholic Church, Kay, wouldn't recognize that if we'd both been married before, they wouldn't give us permission to do it. And the Greek church was very accommodating.
Well, you had a little help with it.
Yeah, they worked it out.
But no, to answer your question, Denise, I'm actually quite amazed that happened. I mean, I've known Chris since he's been a little boy, and it just was, I would just say, a fortuitous event. And as it turned out, so it just made it kind of fun. I mean, both families, I think, felt quite comfortable having it in the Greek cathedral, and that was exactly where we got married. So it was just good luck more than anything else.
Is there anything that you would like to touch on that I haven't asked you about? As I look at the questions, I've asked you all the questions.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. Well, this is the last question. I don't know. Maybe we've already covered it. So, but what's now? Okay, we're kind of coming in for a landing here. What relevance does being Greek have to you now? Would you say that it's changed at all, or seems more to becoming more into the foreground, or just the same as it's always been?
I see what's happening in a bigger context as well. You look around, and ethnicity has almost replaced being patriotic and American. I just see everybody, relishing their heritage, as opposed to being proud of your heritage, but putting America first. I always look at myself as an American who's of Greek descent. I'm not a Greek American. I'm an American first. And I think being Greek was always something that left you with a heritage that was as good as any possible heritage you could have. I mean, you had great history. And that's what you want to look up to, and be able to say that that background is as valuable to me as being educated. It was a wonderful situation. And being Greek in America was difficult, we'll say 20 years ago, but I think the world is becoming more international, and as you become more international, it's as good a background as you can want to have. I mean, there's something wrong with everything. So, you might as well just take the good part out of it.
I know that you've spent some time in Turkey lately.
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you come from there's that Turkish connection in your own back. Do you ever, when you're there, do you ever think about that? Is that ever?
It's really interesting. I deal with a very prominent family there, and it's quite prominent, and they're very proud of the Turkish background. They're international, and they look at Turkey as being Turkey, and this is their country, and that what took place in the 20s was a need to identify themselves and their country as being Turkish. I never look at this family as being anything other than a high quality, open and attractive, and they know I'm Greek, and they know my personal background, and it's always never been an issue. I think it's part of a bigger initiative, and Turkey's kind of in the middle because it has a religious government right now that's trying to cope with the secular past that it's had, and trying to find some compromise that would work in the Middle East to solve the religious crisis and the fanaticism that's there. And Turkey will be a very interesting place to see how it works out. On the other hand, I'm glad I'm Greek. I'd prefer being Greek than Turkish. So that's...
Did you ever go and look for any of the old family stuff?
No, I've never had time.
No, probably never had time. Okay. How about you?
No, I think being Greek today is easier. It's fun. The Greeks in the United States have never been a group that have, I think, much discrimination. Maybe at the very beginnings when they were immigrants, but I think it's been an accepted group, and it's also unique. It's different. And I think it's more acceptable today than any time I can remember. And the good part, which Albert indicated, is it's really fun to say my ancestors go back 5,000 years. They defined democracy. They built the Acropolis. The rest of the people were up in the trees. I mean, we were the ones. And so it's kind of fun. You can have a lot of fun with it, and you're very proud of it. So it gives you, and especially if you know your Greek past, you've read much of the Greek history. I'm not the best at it, but it really is I think, a positive.
All right, so my final question is, now we're going to do, one of you, and I don't know which one, you guys can decide, is going to submit to a DNA test.
You choose, Denise.
Doesn't make any difference.
Doesn't make any difference. Either one you want. Yeah.
Yeah. And what if it comes back and says, not so much Greek, something else?
It'll be fun to see. Yeah.
You know what you should do is take a DNA test from both of us and see if it comes out identical. If it comes out one is half European and the other one's half Asian,
well, no.
you have a problem.
Okay, well, that's something we're going to do later on.
Okay.
And, this has been very good. Thank you so much.
Can we see? I'd love to see the tape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. You can look at it too. And so we'll stop now. I think you guys you've been here for a long time, and
thank you, Denise.
Denise, you did a great job.
You did a great
No, you were really good.